Hello, it is a wild, windswept night, and this is the third episode of our brand new series, Uncanny Cold Cases. This time, we are going back to America in 1961. I want you to picture the scene. It is late summer, and a couple called Betty and Barney Hill pull up outside their house at the end of a long road trip. They have no idea how they got home because 3 hours of their lives have completely seemingly disappeared. The last thing they remember is seeing something impossible and frightening in the sky, and then after that, nothing. Something happened that night that changed Betty and Barney's lives forever. This is a UFO case like no other, but can we explain it? You can leave all your theories and questions in the comments down below. Don't forget to like, hype, and subscribe. But are you ready? Let's do this, because I'm Danny Robbins, and this is Uncanny Cold Cases.
Secrets still remain.
Hello, how are you? Welcome to another episode of Uncanny Cold Cases, our brand new series exploring some of the most intriguing unsolved mysteries in paranormal history. To help me, as always, I am joined by the supernatural A-team. For Team Skeptic, forensic psychologist Dr. Ciarán O'Keefe, and for Team Believer, writer and parapsychologist Evelyn. It is so good to have you both here. Ciarán, this is not a ghost case, this is a UFO, but every time we do UFOs, people are absolutely fascinated by them.
Yeah, and I'm not surprised. I'm equally fascinated by them. But when people think of UFO cases, they think of Area 51 or Roswell. Here, I think we've got a forgotten case that is equally amazing.
This is the OG of UFO cases, isn't it?
It is, and it almost sets the template for future UFO and potential abduction cases as well. And for me, it's a case that is rife with human psychology.
You mentioned the A word, abduction. I mean, just that word plants certain scary things in your head, Evelyn. And, we talk about ghost stories being haunting. UFO cases can be really bloody haunting as well, can't they? And this one leaves a massive impact on the people it happens to.
It does, and I think it doesn't just haunt them, I think it traumatises them, in fact. And although this is the first time the public will get to see a case like this type of phenomena actually goes back hundreds and hundreds of years, particularly this area, the White Mountains that they're in. There's folklore, there's mythology, there's strange lights, there's all sorts of weird stuff going on, and it's stuff that's been written down and reported across centuries, and we're talking about time before aeroplanes were invented. So what is going on here?
Really interesting. In that area, it's quite a thought, isn't it, that things have been happening there even since before planes existed. There have been objects seen in the sky. So interesting. All right, as with all of our cases, let us dive in and bring this story to life as we try and make sense of it. So, it is late September 1961. Barney and Betty Hill are driving home from a short holiday at Niagara Falls, the great waterfall just over the border in Canada. They've been married a year, both on their second marriage. Betty is 42. She's a short, slender, white social worker with a neat, dark bob. Barney is 39. He's a tall, bookish black man who works night shifts at a Boston post office. Remember, this is early 1960s America. It's still heavily segregated. So Barney and Betty face discrimination and threats from people who disapprove of their marriage. They're both active in the civil rights movement. A storm is brewing, but they can't afford another hotel, so they decide to push through. On the way, they stop for dinner right on the border between Canada and the US. The diner is full of young guys who seem determined to make Barney feel uncomfortable, so they don't hang around. They have just 185 miles to go. It is 10 p.m. They should be home by 2. They continue on through the spectacular scenery of the White Mountains, but then, just before 11, Betty notices something bright in the night sky. A falling star? Except it's moving upwards. A satellite? She makes Barney pull over and grabs their binoculars. Closer up, she can see the object more clearly. Her breath catches. "That's no satellite," she says, trembling, handing the binoculars to Barney. He sees a long, flattened craft with windows along one side. Maybe it's a new kind of plane, he thinks, until it suddenly drops at impossible speed, heading straight for them. They scramble back into the car. Betty keeps an eye on the craft whilst Barney drives like he's got the devil on his tail. The object darts about crazily, moving incredibly fast, changing direction, and then it vanishes into the dark. The couple breathe a sigh of relief. Maybe it's gone. But then it reappears ahead of them, dropping low until it hovers above the road. Barney hits the brakes hard and reaches for the pistol in the glove box. He is a black man in 1960s America. This is not the first time he's had to make an unscheduled stop. He squints up at the bright lights. Whatever this is, it is now so close that incredibly, he can make out figures inside. And there's something about them that doesn't look quite human. While some of them seem to be smiling. One in particular has a look on his face that makes Barney feel, he says, like a bug caught in a net. "Betty!" he yells, revving the engine. "We gotta get out of here!" Evelyn, dramatic start to our story. Let's talk about Betty and Barney first up. How do we feel in terms of their reliability as witnesses?
So Barney has a military background, so that means he'll be aware of things like military craft. He'll be a bit more knowledgeable than the average person about certain things. And Betty herself is quite interesting. So her father had a really keen interest in the night sky, and he used to actually watch satellites and things like that, which he taught Betty. So in fact, Betty has an above average knowledge of what would be in the night sky at certain times of year. And so that makes them an interesting couple to be having this experience.
Ciarán, I feel like we are familiar with UFOs now. We've seen the movies. We've maybe watched the X-Files. What was the public perception of them back in 1961? What would have been going through Betty and Barney's mind?
Well, they would have been very familiar with UFOs. There was a proliferation of it in pop culture. You had B-movies, Plan 9 from Outer Space. You had kind of pulp fiction novels around UFO sightings and that sort of thing. But also a few months before, you've got the space race happening. Yuri Gagarin was off into space.
Huge moment.
Huge moment in space history. So they would have been well aware of that. But also, we've got to bear in mind that this is the Cold War era. This is a time when Cold War would have been East versus West. There would have been a nuclear arms race. There would have been spying, a general distrust between two areas of the world. And that builds a real unease amongst the population, so much so that if you see something in the sky, is that alien or is that Russian?
Either way, it's a threat.
Absolutely. It doesn't matter whether it's alien-made or man-made, it's going to present a threat.
All right, really interesting. Evelyn, Betty and Barney are driving into a storm. Is that a factor? Could this be something to do with the climate?
I mean, they could be, except that what they see is a craft that's 60 to 80 feet in diameter and it doesn't stay in the sky. And if we're going to talk about strange weather phenomena, then I feel that we also have to talk about the land, the area in general, because this area, the White Mountains, has got hundreds of years of folklore. It belongs to the Abenaki people. So the Abenaki people in particular had this belief in what they would call sky spirits, essentially, that create strange lights in the skies. And when people go to this area, they tend to disappear. And when they come back, they've got altered memories and they've also got lost time. Now, to them, it's an aspect of folklore. It's an aspect of connecting with a deity or with another realm. To us, that sounds an awful lot like a UFO abduction.
Quickly, the White Mountains. People will be wanting to look this up, kind of get Googling it. There's so much phenomena there. On a scale of 1 to 10, where are we at? Where do the White Mountains sit in terms of paranormal activity?
The White Mountains are an 11, so they're actually part of the Appalachian Mountains, which are considered to be, bar for bar, the most haunted and supernaturally dense mountain range in all of America. From one end of the country to the other, it's nothing but monsters, cryptids, UFOs and ghost stories all day.
Ciarán, have we hit the paranormal jackpot here? I mean, is this why people are seeing things here? Is it to do with the land, potentially?
Well, it could be, but I think there are other environmental type explanations that we need to consider. And that's the possibility that we're dealing with some form of poisoning. And before you interrupt me, let me explain. Betty had in the car nitrate in the form of fertiliser.
Hold on a second. Why has she got fertiliser on her holiday?
I wish
she's doing a cheeky bit of gardening on the side.
Well, she might be. I wish we had Betty in front of us to ask, why did you have fertiliser in the car?
Did she pop to the garden centre on the way back? The White Mountain Garden Centre?
She might have done. She might have been planting potatoes on the way. Who knows?
It's interesting to do that. And don't get me wrong, I saw this when I was kind of researching the case as well. I noticed that detail. And it's a strange one. I don't know why you'd have fertiliser on your holidays. But what's your theory here then? Fertiliser somehow getting to your brain and making you hallucinate?
Well, we know that you can have nitrate poisoning. So, and potentially what we've got is also cross-contamination. If they've got nitrates here in the form of fertiliser, but they've also got picnic food and cooking equipment, there could be cross-contamination.
You are thinking the fertiliser cheekily poisons the picnic?
Yes, I mean, you're animating it, but if they're handling...
I'd be accused of animating it.
I'm
You're
so
saying
sorry.
that they're in the
I
back of
didn't-
the car
I
pure
didn't mean
chewing
to-
on bags of
I
fertiliser.
didn't mean to
I'm not
animate your
saying-
theory, Ciarán.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying you're giving the fertiliser almost kind of an animation of its own. All I'm saying is that potentially the cross-contamination comes from if they're handling fertiliser and then they're handling picnic food and handling cooking equipment. That's where the cross-contamination happens. But if you've got that, it's not the sort of thing that over all of their long drive that it would be inducing hallucination in itself, but it could be a really strong component, given that also Betty and Barney were suffering from health problems, but also Barney is completely exhausted.
I'm going to put you on the spot. Barney looks up. He sees a craft with windows. He sees faces through those windows. Betty, she sees the object there as well. Two people looking up, seeing something that they can describe in forensic detail. Are you seriously saying that's a hallucination?
Yeah, why couldn't it be a hallucination? We've got countless cases and countless examples of people having hallucinations where they're able to provide detail. And we're looking at the case after the fact. So at the point where it's reported, there will be some of this detail. But now we're getting a lot more forensic detail after the fact because there's been time to think about it and time for that memory to evolve.
All right, really interesting. Look, Evelyn, whatever they're seeing here, they are properly frightened, aren't they? You don't reach for a gun in your glove box for nothing.
No, absolutely. And I know that seems like a typically American response, but remember that this is an interracial couple travelling through the night.
It's a good point, I think, isn't it? That they live within a climate of fear just because of the very nature of their relationship, unfortunately. When they rock up in a diner earlier, they get those kind of looks at the people around them. So, there's that kind of base level of fear with Betty and Barney, but then this suddenly takes things into a different realm.
It does. Barney's a military background, so he's aware of what crafts look like. And because Betty herself has got an above average knowledge of the night sky, the fact that they were frightened enough that they stopped, they pulled out binoculars, they sort of verified what they were looking at, they realised the craft had sort of come beside them, and now they're at the point of fear where they pull a gun out of the glove box because they fear for their life. I mean, that's some hallucination.
It's extreme, isn't it? All right, thank you both. Lots of interesting thoughts already, and I would love to hear your thoughts too. Anything you want to say about the case, questions, theories, whatever, put them in the comments down below. Let me know if you are feeling team believer or team skeptic when it comes to the idea of UFOs. But let us see how Betty and Barney's story develops, because things are about to get a whole lot freakier out on the White Mountain Road. Barney can rev that engine as much as he likes. Their car is not moving. It's like it's stuck to the spot. And then they hear a strange sound. It's like a pulsating electronic noise targeted at their car that seems to send actual vibrations through their bodies. Their fear becomes terror now as it seems to overwhelm them, and then nothing, because the next thing they know, they are driving normally through Concord, New Hampshire, about 70 miles from where they were. It's like the flying object was never there. They're really unnerved now. It's dawn when they get home, 3 hours later than expected. Why are they so late? They cannot make sense of it. Both of their watches have stopped. In fact, they never work again. Betty's dress is ripped and covered in a thick pink dust. Barney's shoes have deep gouges in the leather on the toes, almost as if he's been dragged forwards over rough ground. They both feel gross and clammy. They're worried that they might have been exposed to radiation because the craft came so close. Betty goes back out to look at the place on their car where those vibrations seem to hit, and she finds a series of shiny, concentric circles which send her compass crazy when she holds it up close. They have no memory at all of what happened after that vibrational impact on the car. What the actual hell happened to them in those missing hours? Holy crap, Betty and Barney. Ciarán, this idea of missing time, it's something that we see in other UFO cases too, the idea that people just do not remember several hours potentially. It feels really odd here.
It does feel really odd, and I can imagine if it happened to me personally and I lost time, I would be genuinely perturbed. I wouldn't know what was going on. I had a rugby accident injury when I was younger and hit my head, and I lost about 3 or 4 hours of my life.
But you are certain you weren't abducted by aliens?
Well, I'm not certain, but but it's genuinely worrying when you've got that missing
No, totally.
time.
I mean, it's a frightening thing to not be in control of your own body or your own mind.
Exactly, but we've do have to remember that this is a couple that are now lost. They're in an area they don't know. They're lost. They're incredibly tired. They've got this disorientation. So are those factors that could result in them having missing time?
It is a long time, isn't it, to have unaccounted 3 hours? What do you make of this part of the case, Evelyn?
Yeah, it's something that we would typically see, as Ciarán says, associated with things like head trauma. I would also be looking for accident. So, of course, if they're driving late at night and they're tired and then there's missing time, then I would expect the car to be wrecked. I would expect there to be some sort of report of injury or crash.
Oh, if they'd had an actual accident?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely, but they haven't. Regardless of whether or not you think it's something that's paranormal that's happened, something has happened to them. You don't hallucinate your way into impact in the car and impact on their clothes. Something has happened to them.
This is important, isn't it, Ciarán? With our Team Skeptic hats on, do we have a problem here with all this physical evidence in front of us?
We do have a problem. I'll grant you it makes it more difficult to explain, but it doesn't mean that it's not explainable, so the fact that we've got that compass spinning, and that's something tangible that can be seen, we can't discount the possibility that there'll be some component of the car that could be causing that. So, for example, if the car had a solenoid as part of the battery, that could cause the compass to spin. And we know that particular model of car that they had a solenoid battery, and it was in the area near to where the compass was. So there are potential explanations, but it does make it more difficult to explain.
A strange pink dust on Betty's dress. Explain that one away.
That is very, very difficult. I don't know where that would come from. Pink dust is very, very odd, and I find it very difficult to explain.
You know what I'm thinking? That trip to the garden centre. Could that come from a flower? Like if you've ever walked past something like a
yes.
fuchsia, you get that dust on you. I mean, is that a possibility?
That's a really good explanation. Yes, welcome to Team Skeptic.
Do I get the paranormal Paul Hollywood handshake?
I think you do.
Thank you very much.
I actually have some of the Betty dress analysis from over the years, and I can actually tell you what.
Oh, hang on a
stuff is
second.
it.
You've got actual analysis of it.
So the dress samples were taken from it over several decades, and they were tested by lots of different laboratories by scientists for different things. Now, the first thing is that we're able to rule out that it didn't come from Betty. It's not sweat, vomit, blood, urine, anything like that. Okay. The other thing was that in the early 2000s, when science had caught up, we were able to test the dress for heavy metals, and they found two things that were a bit disturbing.
Iron Maiden and Metallica?
No.
Okay.
Worse. The two things that they found on the dress were tellurium and rhodium. Now, for anyone not familiar with those, tellurium is a very rare element that averages only 3 parts per billion in the Earth's upper crust. It's in fact more prevalent in space. So this is not something you come into contact in your everyday life. Rhodium is the most valuable element and the rarest element on the entire planet.
Wow.
It's mainly used today in catalytic converters, which are fitted to cars, essentially, to try and bring down pollution. But these weren't popular until the 1970s, and there isn't one on the car that Betty and Barney were driving. It's most interesting to me that these are elements that are more prevalent in space than they are on Earth.
Bloody hell, Evelyn. Do you want to just unhook that mic and drop it? That's an amazing moment. This is really strange, isn't it?
It is really strange, but I think Evelyn makes a really good point. From a forensic science perspective, this would not stand up in a court of law.
The bit that really blows my mind is those strange circles on the side of the car. Where are those coming from?
I can't think of anything that would cause that on a car in a natural world. If we can't give you a supernatural explanation, then what's the natural explanation?
Ciarán.
Yeah, I'm racking my brains about this because it is tangible physical evidence that is, again, it's quite difficult to explain, but we've got potential
I love that phrase,
here.
difficult to explain. Does that mean that you can't explain it?
No, I think we've got to try and find some way of discounting the possibility that there isn't another human element here. That, this couple faced kind of tension and anxiety and kind of a response when they were in that diner.
Because of being an interracial couple?
Because of being an interracial couple. I think we've got to discount the possibility that there are those other human elements. If we can do that, then potentially you've got something interesting in terms of UFO and abduction. But the lovely thing is that at least we have some physical evidence to discuss.
Whenever you say the lovely thing, I think you mean the bloody frightening thing there. This is an absolutely terrifying case. So much to debate here. What are you thinking right now? Are you Team Believer or Team Skeptic? Let me know in the comments. Have you got a theory on what happened to Betty and Barney? How do we explain those missing hours, that pink dust on Betty's dress, the circles on the car? I'd love to know, because this is all deeply weird, right? And it's about to get a whole lot weirder. Barney and Betty are so rattled by what happened to them that night that days later they go to their local police station. The chief of police listens, baffled, and refers them to something called Project Blue Book, a US military task force set up to deal with reports of strange flying objects in American airspace. This is the middle of the Cold War, remember, and it's a very real threat of secret Russian technology making it into American airspace. Soon, they're speaking with a guy called Major Henderson from the nearby Air Force Base. The Major decides that they are excellent witnesses. Their accounts seem to be honest and consistent. He files a report, then advises them to go home and forget about what happened. Barney, ever the skeptic, is relieved. He wants to drop the whole thing, but then he gets ill. He starts to have panic attacks, high blood pressure, ulcers, insomnia, headaches. His doctor finds no obvious physical cause and suggests it could be anxiety. If Barney could try to make sense of what happened to them that night, then maybe his anxiety would lift. The doctor asks if Betty and Barney would be willing to undergo hypnosis. Now, to Betty and Barney, this sounds a little wacky, but Barney is getting sicker, and in the end, they decide that it is worth trying. Over several months, they are hypnotized separately in soundproof rooms. Their accounts are bizarrely similar. Tapes of these sessions have survived. You can hear them online. They are bloody eerie. Both people describe being taken on board the craft, separated, put in gowns and examined. Betty recalls a needle biopsy being taken from her abdomen. And you can hear horror in Barney's voice as he relives an alien using a probe to extract sperm from him. Their stories are impossible, nightmarish, yet they match, especially their description of the site where the craft landed to release them. A clearing with sandy ground and centrally a burned tree. The therapist says it's almost unheard of for two people to hallucinate the same thing or to suffer parallel amnesia. But the stories are wild and the hypnosis sessions end with no satisfying answers. So in 1965, Betty and Barney drive back to the area where they blacked out 4 years earlier. As they approach Route 3, Barney suddenly feels compelled to turn onto Route 175. He can't explain it, but something is drawing him there. They drive into the woods, down a gravel track, towards a place that feels horribly familiar. It's a clearing, a patch of sandy ground, and in the middle, on its own, is a burnt tree. Shivers down my spine. Evelyn, I have to be completely honest and say that I normally feel quite skeptical about accounts of hypnosis, of people regaining memories, particularly in these UFO abduction cases. But it's horribly eerie, isn't it? We have two people describing almost identical things, separated in soundproof rooms. What is going on?
Yeah, I totally understand why people are skeptical or uncomfortable talking about these things because they feel so extreme. But for these two people, it doesn't matter if it's a supernatural event. It's a traumatic event that happened to them, and now they're trying to recall what exactly happened so they can piece it together, because I think the most frightening aspect for them is the bit that they don't know about.
Brilliant. And Ciarán, if this was the Betty Hill case, we could probably explain it away as false memory. If it was the Barney Hill case, we could do that. But it's the Betty and Barney Hill. They're both having these same memories. Can they be false if two people have identical memories?
Well, they could if there was discussion about the events prior to them being hypnotized and going through, those sessions. So yes, we could discount it from a skeptical point of view if that were the case. But I think the interesting thing here for me is that the claim is that Betty and Barney actually didn't speak about it prior to those sessions. And I can understand that, when you have a traumatic experience happen to you, you either do talk about it, you get the support and you tell the story, or what a lot of people do is they keep it bottled within.
And I think that's the sense of Barney, isn't it? That he really clammed up. He did not want to talk about this. He found it very destabilizing, and then suddenly it kind of pours out in these sessions. What a moment when they drive up and they find that spot with the tree in the middle of nowhere.
It is a very, very odd moment.
I mean, just describing that now, I felt absolute shivers down my spine.
Yes, me too.
It's horrible, isn't it? I mean, what do we feel these people have gone through? It's being taken seriously by Project Blue Book, this organisation that's been set up to monitor. I mean, not just aliens, potential Soviet incursions as well, but they are taken seriously.
They are. So this Project Blue Book essentially looks at any sort of unidentifiable aerial phenomena, because this is the Cold War era. There is potential for spies and things like that, but we're also seeing potentially what we would call UFOs. And Project Blue Book were able to confirm that on that same evening, they recorded on their ground radar seeing something that was unidentifiable, that they recorded for 18 minutes. But the original report described it as a large aircraft with erratic behaviour.
Bloody erratic behaviour, really. I mean, if it's doing what Betty and Barney describe, I mean, is this potential evidence here, Ciarán?
Potential evidence in terms of the corroboration, in terms of that radar, yes, it is. It is picking up on something, but we're making a leap by saying that it's necessarily alien in nature. And I think that's the difficulty. We've got supporting evidence now for their testimony that something was seen in the sky.
They're not making this up, are they?
No, they're definitely not making it up now. And up to now, I would have said yes, potentially, or there's some sort of psychological or environmental influence that could explain it. But now we've got supporting evidence to show that they saw something in the sky. Now we've got to establish whether it's an actual UFO, a flying saucer, or it's something else.
But whatever it is, I mean, it's terrifying, and these memories are coming horrifically back. Blimey heck, this is such an interesting case. Please keep all of your comments coming in, and don't forget to like, hype, and subscribe. Spread the word about Uncanny Cold Cases. We would love that. But let's jump back one last time to the 1960s. Betty and Barney tried to return to normal life, sharing their experience only with close friends and a handful of trustworthy authority figures, the police, the military, and their doctors. But then something awful happens. A reporter from the Boston Traveler newspaper somehow gets hold of confidential tapes from their hypnosis sessions, and also the notes from the interviews Betty and Barney gave to Project Blue Book, that UFO task force. One tabloid headline later, their story is national news, going the 1960s equivalent of viral. Books and films follow, sensationalizing what happened. In 1967, Barney sadly dies of a stroke at just 46, never finding the answers that haunted him. 9 years later, in 1976, Betty receives an unexpected call from the very journalist who leaked their story. He tells her that since his article, more than a dozen people who were in the White Mountains that same night have come forward with their own sightings. None of these witnesses know each other. These are 12 individual reports from 12 different people, and he tells Betty he has taken a map of New Hampshire and plotted the movement of all the flying objects reported that night, and they converge in one place, the sandy spot where the hills say that they were abducted, that clearing with the burnt tree. Oh my God, I think we know what is going to be in our heads tonight as we fall asleep. Uncanny community, what do you make of this classic, chilling cold case? It is the OG alien abduction story. Ciarán said it, but is it proof that there really is something out there? Or is it testament to the power of the human imagination to 3D print our own nightmares? But that little terrifying spot with the burnt tree is going to be ingrained in all of our brains tonight, Ciarán, isn't it? I mean, this case, it was huge news at the time, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. And I guess it was famous because the nature of the case, we had so many aspects that were just enthralling with so many elements to it. And
so many witnesses as well.
Well, that's the key. We've got multiple witnesses, and I always say that's the holy grail. We can't discount the possibility that some of those witness statements might be erroneous, there might be misperception, but it does strengthen the case for Betty and Barney.
All right, Evelyn, I like to put Ciarán on the spot. I'm going to put you on the spot right now. Were Betty and Barney taken on board that craft that night?
I'm so 50-50 on UFOs. I don't believe that we're alone in the universe. I just don't think that's statistically possible. But the volume of evidence in this case is absolutely insane in terms of the variety of stuff, from the chemicals that were on Betty's dress, to things that happened to the car, to the burnt tree, to the missing time, to the joint watches being stopped. There's so many other people reporting phenomenon in the area. I think regardless of whether or not you believe it was UFOs that took them onto a craft, something happened to these people.
That is a politician's answer. That avoided answering the question. Were they on board that craft?
I don't know if they were on board the craft. I don't know. Although the thing is, if they were not taken on board the craft, where does that come from? Where does that come from? Because people will think, oh, well, that's typical, UFO abduction, you were taken on a craft. No, this was the first case that was reported to the public like this. So this wasn't pulled from sci-fi, this wasn't pulled from the X-Files or for comic books. These were the first people to report an abduction of this kind with this much detail. So where did that come from in their brains?
This is the question we will be asking for probably years to come. Thank you both, and thank you for spending your time with us. Let us know what you thought of the episode in the comments down below. How do you feel having heard all of the evidence, the experts' theories? Are you team believer or team skeptic? And if you've got an idea for a cold case that you think we should look at, I'd love to hear from you. Put it in the comments below or email me, uncanny@bbc.co.uk, or find me, Danny Robbins, on social media. I'm across pretty much every platform. This has been fun. I love a UFO, but next time on Uncanny Cold Cases, we are back in the world of ghosts to take a deep dive into a spectacular haunting in Georgian London. Prepare for some serious shivers.
People don't understand where the knocking is coming from, and interestingly, it doesn't seem to be coming from one place. It seems to be coming from different points in the room. It's moving around. This is ground zero for people trying to talk to ghosts.
Do I think it's paranormal? I think what we've got here is a smorgasbord of psychology and deception.
Secrets still remain.